Each week, nearly a dozen movies are released theatrically. 40 films a month, more than 400 a year. That's a plethora of cinema. Too much cinema. You'd have to be an addict to see all that, but don't fret. We've got you covered. This is CinemAddicts.
Hey everyone, what's up? It's a new week of CinemAddicts. This is CinemAddicts episode 269. We are covering movies that are coming out for the week of Friday, November 22nd, 2024. The movies covered for this episode of CinemAddicts include Blitz, Bread and Roses, Ernest Cole, Lost and Found, and The Fix. Eric Holmes, how are you?
Oh, not bad. Not bad at all.
Anything exciting or anything new while you're typing away last minute on the Google Doc? What are you up to? What are you thinking about?
This and that.
How's your back?
Back's doing a lot better.
Good.
I think it was like a slip disc or something, and something must have been inflamed. It's no longer inflamed.
Oh,
it still still gets tricky, but overall, it's getting better.
Very good. That's
stretches. Watch a bunch of movies. Actually, I watched a bunch of movies the week prior, but I finally get to talk about them this week, so that'll be good. Oh, okay. So you have a couple of things. Oh, right. You're going to actually you're going to review the movie Afterwar, which you actually did the interview with that director last week, and we released that, and you were under embargo for Afterwar, but you're going to be talking about that. Bruce Purkey has been doing a lot of work in the Cinem-Attic, because he is going to have reviews of the Hulu miniseries Emilia Perez. Now, new Hulu miniseries Say Nothing, the Netflix film Emilia Perez. I have heard only good things about it. And he has a review of Blitz. Actually, Eric has a review of Blitz as well. Loaded show for this week, for this part one of CinemAddicts, okay, episode 269. But we will also have interviews for the second half of the week, which we will release on Friday. And that's interviews for Street Trash and Armor. Eric and I will have reviews of both of those movies as well. So it's going to be a jam-packed week. Let's start off with the first half of this episode. Well, Eric, The Fix. You actually decided to go see The Fix. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about this movie. It's considered a sci-fi thriller, and the plot summary is, quote, a toxic compound infects Earth's atmosphere. Pharmaceutical giant sells immunity, but most can't afford this daily dose. When a troubled model named Ella, played by Grace Van Dien, she unwittingly takes a drug at a party. And then after taking that drug, it has very interesting side effects, and she is transformed in more ways than one. We're not going to give away what happens, but she doesn't look too, she still looks like a human, but there's some discoveries within her body composition after taking that drug. Pursued by a dangerous gang and authorities in cahoots with this pharmaceutical giant, she hunts for a fix to reverse the drug's effects. The movie is directed and written and produced by Kelsey Egan. It's shot in South Africa, running at 98 minutes. Again, it's a sci-fi thriller. Eric Holmes, low budget sci-fi thriller directed by Kelsey Egan. What did you think of The Fix? Well, the budget didn't look low budget. It looked pretty good. And I also wouldn't say she took the drug unwittingly. I think she
right.
I think she kind of wanted to kill herself or do something of that sort, because she was in a pretty bad spot when she took it.
Right. She willingly took the drug because it was from her boyfriend and she was mad at him. She took the drug unwittingly. She had no idea what was in it. Yeah. And I don't know if she maybe or not. I don't think she just wanted to take it maybe to get some kind of high. She had no idea what was in that drug.
I mean, she took all of it.
She took all of it. Yeah, she did take all of it. My goodness.
You don't do that when you want to party. You want to do that when you want to end things. But it was definitely a point in her life where it's like, we're just doing this and I don't care. And she starts getting, how much should we say about it? No, she starts getting
transformed.
Yeah, transformed, I guess. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's a good way to. So it's got some body horror elements. It's got some superhero origin elements. It's
conspiracy, government, pharma conspiracy.
One of the things, and maybe you can shed some light on this. They had the bit about like the air outside, you can't breathe, so everyone's got to wear masks. Otherwise, the outside like damage them or
air is a premium or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I don't know that ever came around again, or maybe that's what the drug was originally supposed to help. I can't remember, but I don't remember them going like that air outside being unbreathable seemed to be a thing at the early on, but then later on in the movie it didn't seem to affect it that much. So that was kind of strange. But overall, this was kind of a pretty good sort of thriller, sort of body horror, sort of superhero movie. Not unlike Upgrade, kind of similar to that. You know, someone gets a bunch of weird powers and they're trying to figure it out. But
did you like the mixture of action or the way it was done? Did you like the full execution of it?
Yeah, I had no idea what this was going to be going in. So like as the movie went on, I thought it was one thing, and then different things started developing. I'm like, oh, okay. Didn't know they were going to go here. I'm cool with this. Oh, didn't know they were going here either. I'm cool with that too. So lots of surprises, lots of cool ideas. Yeah, there were some things here and there that probably could have been done better. But overall, I like this one.
Well, so I talked to Kelsey Egan recently, I think maybe late last week. And I asked her about the main character, Ella, played by Grace Van Dien. Ella is an interesting protagonist because she's not your average, you're saying sort of a superhero origin story. But when you meet her, she's not the most likable character because she has her own problems and whatnot. And it's interesting how she's the main character, but she's not your typical goody two-shoes likable protagonist, which I really enjoyed for the fix. And for what it's worth, the movie shot in South Africa. I liked what Kelsey Egan was able to do with the budget. And I just really had a good time with the fix overall. I think it's a solid sci-fi thriller, and don't expect like Star Wars or a $200 million sci-fi thriller. But I think this movie has a lot of moxie, and I like the way it was edited. The pacing, the action goes by at a very breakneck pace. So within 98 minutes, I'm glad this was not a 110, 115 bloated film. I think this moves competently. I was entertained. So I enjoyed it. I'm giving The Fix 4 stars. This was a solid sci-fi thriller for me. I am looking for, Kelsey Egan, she previously directed this survivalist thriller called The Glass House. After watching The Fix, I definitely want to see The Glass House to see if it's just as effective. And yeah, I had a good time with The Fix. Eric, your final thought and rating on The Fix.
I don't want to say anything about the ending other than this kind of ends similar to how the Fellowship of the Ring does, where like the movie had like it ties up everything at the end, but then it kind of doesn't leave on a cliffhanger, but it leaves on there's more to this story. And if there's a sequel, I'm definitely interested to see the sequel, because now that everything has happened and now the character's in this new spot, it would be neat to see where they go from there.
Yeah.
But as an origin story, I liked it. I'd probably give it 3.5.
Cool.
And definitely interested to see what a sequel to this would be.
Okay, so that is 3.5 stars from Eric Holmes, 4 stars from me. Both of us recommend the sci-fi thriller The Fix. For you listeners, you can rent and purchase this movie on digital starting Friday, November 22nd. So that is our first one down. Next up, I got this in on time, and this has been a really weird day for me, Eric. I didn't tell you this. I've been promising you, CinemAddicts listeners, Patreon members, The Junketeer for 3 to 4 weeks. I recorded an episode 2 weeks ago. I still haven't uploaded it to Patreon. That said, this was my first press junket in maybe several years. I still do interviews like Eric does, virtual, but I left the house and I drove to West Hollywood.
Wait, back up. You left the house?
Right. I actually left the house and I interviewed people. And yeah, so I interviewed some really interesting Filipino actors, and they are very popular. Their names are Catherine Bernardo and Alden Richards, and they're in a new movie called Hello, Love Again. I believe that's the name of the movie. It's doing really well in the US. It's a Filipino film. I think on the demographic, that's probably why I was here. I'm a Filipino journalist, Filipino Thai journalist. So it was great to actually go out, and I had an 8-minute interview on camera. I will make sure that the camera is just trained on them, and I'll be posting it up on our various websites and YouTube channels shortly. So I will talk about that experience this week. I will release that episode 0 of Junketeer from a couple of weeks ago, and then I'll also talk about my first junket in years for the Junketeer. Again, that's going to be a Patreon, Apple Podcast, subscriptions kind of situation. So more on that later. That said, Ernest Cole, Lost and Found. I didn't even write this down on the Google Doc, Eric. I saw this movie. I was able to squeeze it in with all the stuff I had to do today. I'm really excited to talk about it. Most of it's going to be Bruce just bringing in the rear and just talking about this documentary, but I'll get to it and I'll give you my quick thoughts on it. Okay, so here we go. Oscar-nominated filmmaker Raoul Peck's Ernest Cole, Lost and Found is a new documentary chronicling the life and work of Ernest Cole, one of the first Black freelance photographers in South Africa, whose early pictures, shocking at the time of their first publication, revealed to the world Black life under apartheid. So he left South Africa in 1966 and then lived in exile for the rest of his days in the United States, mainly in New York City. So the documentary focuses early on his life in South Africa. He released a book in 1968, which was very popular, detailing the apartheid and all of these pictures from South Africa. And then also, while he did receive acclaim for that book, his pictures of America were not, for some reason, during his lifetime, were not as well received as his pictures from South Africa, which is a little bit sad because you get to see from this documentary his POV of Americana, specifically in New York City, the South. You have a lot of pictures of Alabama. And he was surprised living in apartheid, thinking initially that he was going to go out and find some kind of freedom in New York. But lo and behold, this is 1960s America. And there is still rampant racism, and there is still a level of segregation that he was surprised to see in the American South as well as in New York, but most prevalently in the South. But it's a very interesting documentary. It's directed by Raoul Peck, and Bruce will have more information on this movie, but I was really blown away by this film because, first of all, the narration is by Lakeith Stanfield. Very great actor. Lakeith Stanfield does a narration as Ernest Cole, and you get to see the documentary from the words of Ernest Cole. A lot of Cole's narration is fiction. It's made up by Raoul Peck, envisioning what Ernest Cole would say amidst these different photographs that you get to see within this documentary. But I don't mind that fictional license. Some people might, but I really enjoy that flavor to this documentary. And what's the biggest, it's not a spoiler, the biggest discovery in this documentary, that after his death, over 60,000 of his 35 millimeter film negatives were discovered in a bank vault in Stockholm, Sweden. So he died with a lot of his photos not being shown to the public. And that's what makes this documentary so special. You get to really delve into the life of Ernest Cole. And the documentary is called Ernest Cole, Lost and Found. It will be, it's coming out in theaters this Friday, November 22nd. I'll have more information on it later. I don't think I put it here on the Google Doc, but it's very fantastic. I'm giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Very gripping documentary. Really loved it. Let me look right now about where you can actually find it. I think it's going to be out in different theaters. 1 second. Yes, it opens in New York at the IFC Center on November 22nd, and then it'll be released in Los Angeles at the Laemmle Royal November 29th. It's very immersive, and I'm not going to actually talk about what happened to Ernest Cole, but a lot of that stuff is pretty heartbreaking. That said, it's great to see Raoul Peck bring some little bit of a fictional license to the words of Ernest Cole, and you get a really fully rounded look or a peek into this very special photographer who should have actually been more celebrated in his life. Very, very immersive and important documentary. Again, that is Ernest Cole, Lost and Found. All right, that is it for the movies that we reviewed for this part 1 of CinemAddicts. Eric Holmes, you do have a recommend. Let us know what is the recommend that you have for this week.
I got another feature movie, Steve McQueen one.
Oh, my bad. You have Blitz, right?
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. So this is Blitz. It comes out it's been in theaters, and it premieres on November 22nd on Apple TV Plus. Eric Holmes, you got this actually. You were able to see this, I believe, yesterday. And what can you tell us about Blitz?
It's basically, a 9-year-old boy in World War II London. His mom, Saoirse Ronan, she's basically sending them out. They're collecting all the kids and moving them out because I guess the area is pretty dangerous to be in. And movies like this, and I guess it's just a matter of people in the room, but I always wonder why they don't bring the whole family, why they just bring the kids. But anyway, that's what happens. Her kid George doesn't want to go. And he's actually kind of angry with his mom because he didn't quite understand didn't understand the position he's in. So then when the mom puts him on the train, like he's like, I hate you, and like won't even look at her. And she's freaking out because it's like, this might be the last time I see my son. And this is not the last exchange I want. But anyway, he gets on the train and he leaves. And Saoirse Ronan's sitting at home, just working, doing the stuff that she's doing. And on the train, George jumps off, like not like they kill himself, but to escape, like, rolls down a hill or whatever. And then he's trying to make his way back home. And so the rest of the movie is the adventures on the way back. The people he meets, some people are nice, it gets more of an insight into what's going on. Some people are not so nice, and he gets, grows up a little too quick. This one started off kind of, I wasn't really digging it too much, but once George kind of jumped off the train and started going on his adventures, that's when it started picking up, and it just kept getting better from there. But Steve McQueen, he's the great filmmaker. Everyone knows this.
Yeah, 12 Years a Slave, Widows, I believe, was another movie. That miniseries, I forgot the name of the miniseries, Small Axe, I believe. Yeah, he did that. This
is probably my least favorite of his I saw, but a bad Steve McQueen movie is a great movie by any other metric. So this one's still definitely worth watching. And again, as the movie goes on, it just keeps getting better. There's some stuff that happens like towards the last half of it. That thing happened. I saw that, so that's cool. But yeah, Blitz is a good one. Go check it out. I wonder if this is going to be like one of those Oscar type movies. Who knows? But
it's currently on Rotten Tomatoes. That is 81% from the critics. For the popcorn meter, from the popcorn meter from the audience, 65%. So do you have an idea why it's not higher? Do you have a little bit of a guess or a gander? You said it's the weakest out of his oeuvre. Maybe why is it the weakest, you think?
I think because it just takes a while to get to where, it's going. But then once it does, it starts getting good. I wonder if maybe certain people that didn't like it were just checked out early. That could be it.
Okay.
But yeah, not
do you
bad.
Do you think it'll get any Oscar buzz or Oscar?
It seems like one of those movies that would. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be one I'd vote for, but if it got like Best Picture, Best Director, I'd be like, that makes sense. I'm not angry about it. But I give this one a 3.5.
Okay, 3.5 stars from Eric Holmes. Again, that is a movie directed by Steve McQueen, and it is headlined by Saoirse Ronan as the aforementioned mother, who's understandably freaking out about her son who just jumped off the train, and she's trying to find him. So that is Blitz on Apple TV Plus, November 22nd. Finally, Eric, you do have a recommend. What do you have to talk about?
Yes, documentary, sort of. It's called Afterwar, and BJ Stermus, director. She follows so she did a short, like however many years ago, with these kids, and after some time passed, she like reconnected with them, or had always, just basically saw where they're at, and then decided to kind of add to that short, similar to I guess Boyhood or the 7-Up documentaries, where like, so this is like a documentary that's spanned over a decade at least, and we're seeing kind of how their lives have just gone on after the war. This is very stylized, so it's hard to even call this a documentary because a lot of the bits are set up. There would be someone like staring at the camera, whispering at the camera in the middle of like a dance club, for example. That's not a shot you're just going to pick up in a documentary. That's a shot you need to set up and have people, involved, do the things. It's definitely interesting and hard to kind of describe. I talked with the director, and she was talking about, one of the sticking points with the documentary is that you're supposed to present the truth. And then with this, they're actively not.
Emotional truth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you find the emotional truth in the movie as opposed to the literal truth, because when you're doing a documentary, you have a obligation to present things as fairly and truthfully as you can. But then this isn't exactly a documentary. It's sort of a narrative, sort of a documentary, sort of a mockumentary at times almost. But I think it does kind of get into these real life people's heads and kind of in a stylized way kind of get an idea of where they're at in life and where they're going and how they feel about things.
Is it an arresting watch? Is it worth people's time to give Afterwar a shot?
I think so. And in fact, I think I kind of wish you or Bruce saw this, because I feel that you and Bruce will like this a lot more than I did. And I like this, but this seems, the style of this and the way this movie goes along, I think this would be like catnip for you specifically. And I think Bruce would like it a lot more too.
Okay. So that is Afterwar, this hybrid doc. What would you give this? What is the rating for Afterwar?
I'm going to be 3.5 star Eric today. So I'm a 3.5 on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if you gave this 4.5, 5 stars.
Afterwar is currently playing as a virtual screening experience through December 1st via Doc NYC's screening room. So I will leave a link if you're interested in checking out the virtual Afterwar in a virtual manner. We'll have the link up there. Obviously, it'll be working until December 1st. So maybe you guys can give it a shot and tell us what you think of Afterwar. All right, that is it for this episode, Cinematics episode 269. I think, well, I forgot to mention, Eric, in a couple of weeks for our Patreon, we will be reviewing Croupier and Chopper. What I was a little bit nervous because Croupier, it says on IMDb 1998, okay? And we're covering for the month of November, the year 2000. And then I looked it up on Google. It was actually released in 1998 in different parts, but then it was actually the release date of Croupier is 2000. So if you guys are wondering about that.
Wait, how does that work? Weird. They release it in parts?
No, they released it late. I guess they released it late in like stateside here in America. So it didn't come out till the year 2000. So it had been out in England and I'm sure other markets a couple of years before. So that is Croupier. And I remember around that time, I saw Croupier in theaters and people were saying, oh, this Clive Owen, he's not as new as you think because he actually made that movie 2 years ago. I specifically remember that after reading the reviews on Croupier. So Croupier and Chopper will be our Patreon picks for this November. Thanks again to Patreon member Steven Schrock for that. Do you want to say anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel bad about all the 3.5 star reviews.
Why?
But
you're a reviewer, 3.5.
Well, no,
it's a solid rating.
It sounds bad. But like the fakes, Blitz, and Afterwar are all really good. Check them all out.
Yeah. 3.5. Remember, 3.5 out of 5 for us is a solid review.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit iffy when we get to 3. 3 is sort of a mild recommend.
I hate star ratings.
I hate star ratings.
Just go watch the movie. It's good.
No, don't watch the movie. Listen to our ratings.
And do watch the movie. They're good.
No, only listen to our ratings and then watch the movie for our ratings. Listen to us. You must learn.
Ignore all the star ratings except for 6.9 star ratings.
That's hilarious. All right, so stay tuned again for this episode because Bruce Purkey is in the Cinem-Attic with some great just reviews of Emilia Perez, Say Nothing, and I was going to say Street Trash and Armor. Nope. He's also going to do a review of Ernest Cole Lost and Found and Blitz. But before we get to Bruce Purkey, here's Star.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining Cinematics.
Hello, welcome to another Cinem-Attic. Cinema in the attic. Me in the attic, watching cinema, watching movies, watching flicks, watching celluloid. Yes, some of this was shot on celluloid, so I can say that. Everybody, I've got quite a few movies this week, unusually so. Probably next week I won't have as many, but this week for some reason I had enough time to watch a bunch of movies. I have, and one series, and they're pretty much all new, so hopefully that will give you some value added. We've got Bread and Roses, a documentary. We've got another documentary, Ernest Cole, Lost and Found. Sorry about any sounds here from my notebook. I've got Street Trash, which is kind of a remake slash sequel to the original movie from the 80s. We have Emilia Perez on Netflix. We have Say Nothing, a series on Hulu, and Blitz, which is coming to has been in theaters for a very limited run and is going to be coming now to Apple TV Plus. You should have that available by the time this drops or very soon after. Okay, let us go ahead and go through the two documentaries really quick. They are pretty easy to describe. What you've got first is you've got Bread and Roses, directed by Sarah Mani, and this is in Kabul. It takes place in Kabul mostly a couple years ago, but generally after the fall of Afghanistan, or specifically Kabul, to the Taliban, where the Taliban has retaken power. And what you're doing here is mostly following several women and how the role of women, and you might expect under the Taliban, how the role of women in that area specifically has changed with the reinstallation of the Taliban as the rulers of that area. So some of the main things they do, if you don't know, of course, there's, I think, Sharia law, I believe is what it's called. But either way, the Taliban basically, women don't hold jobs. Women, of course, are covered. Women, a lot of times they have things like women can't go out in public alone without a man. They are not supposed to be getting educated other than learning things like how to sew. So pretty restrictive, and you've got to imagine there's a whole bunch of people here in this area who have had other types of lives and all of a sudden are supposed to change to this sort of life. And even if they may be devout Islamic followers, they are not followers of the teachings necessarily of the Taliban. And in fact, several of the people in here make a point that they do not consider the Taliban's ways to be Islamic necessarily, as much as they are just a restrictive political system. So the main person you follow a few people. Boy, I've got her name down here. It's Dr. Zahra Mohammadi. There are a couple other people. There's another woman that we follow there's one woman we follow who basically early on finds a way, and even though it's hard for her, she finds a way and she gets out of Afghanistan and she ends up going to Pakistan. And she's kind of essentially in like not a refugee camp per se, but she's essentially adrift. And she's constantly worried about the women that are left behind, and she's not living well and in a great situation where she is currently. And she's really, really sad to not be in her homeland, and just kind of getting the feeling for that, almost that refugee experience, especially something that's a forced refugee of sorts. So you follow her story, but I think even more interestingly is the story I said of the Dr. Zahra, and she stays in Afghanistan. She is a dentist, and she's also pretty quickly becomes kind of an activist and an organizer of women who are, kind of fighting for their rights in Afghanistan. You see her in her dentist office holding meetings, because basically her dentist office, she's not allowed to be a dentist anymore for, officially, even though she does do a little bit still. She can't really do it safely, and she can't do it officially. And just watching, you talk about people around here who, people who want to be like demonstrators or fight for a cause. But when you see it in a situation like this, where a person is going out and doing a demonstration that literally might lead to their arrest and or torture and or death, then you see the people in like this kind of a movie doing that, and you're like, wow, there's a level of bravery far above and beyond what you normally see in American activist dissident groups. I'm not saying that the activists and dissidents in America aren't, really devout in what they believe and aren't willing to, put themselves on the line, and it can't get more dangerous as time goes on even. I'm just saying to see it in action in a place like Afghanistan can really give you an impact of what they're up for. All that being said, this movie is a pretty basic but pretty good documentary. I'd say it's a little bit rambly. It's one of those documentaries where you're getting the footage you get because the people inside are getting the best they can get. So it's not done it's not done with the eye of a photojournalist. It's not done with the organization and the slickness that you might get with a documentary crew. So it's much more of a, boots on the ground style of footage that you're just getting the way you get it. So I could see this movie being a bit annoying. I know that Eric sometimes gets annoyed by these documentaries that he kind of feels don't go anywhere. And I can see there's some of that in here. There's a little bit of, that kind of that randomness of a video blog or something like that. All that being said, I think there's enough, and there's, what they're getting and what you're seeing in the day-to-day life here is impactful enough that it's definitely worth checking out. And I would probably go 3.5 on this one. Once again, if we could get a little more access, a little more like a crew in there that knew how to get into these places and really get some of the footage that we want to see, it would be amazing. But what you do get as far as the people is pretty great in this. Now, second one we got here, this is a documentary called Ernest Cole, Lost and Found, directed by my writing is so terrible I can never read my own writing. It's by Raoul Peck. And you may know Raoul Peck as a very adept documentarian and one who's a pretty great storyteller and picks these kind of iconic, maybe slightly less known figures in history and does these very exhaustive, really thorough and immersive kind of documentaries. I think the most famous in the past has been I Am Not Your Negro, which was a very, very good documentary. This one is similarly pretty great. Unfortunately, it lives in the same year as the soundtrack to A Coup, which is so fantastic. This one is great too, but I think it doesn't quite reach the heights of soundtrack, although this is pretty great. So what this is the story of Ernest Cole. And for those of you who didn't know, like myself, I did not know, Ernest Cole was kind of a renowned photographer, and he specifically got his start in South Africa, which is where he is from. And in the 60s, was it the 60s, I believe he started? I think it was in the 60s, he was shooting tons and tons of photographs in South Africa, specifically kind of showing the lives of Black people in South Africa and the apartheid system there. Just day-to-day life, the cities, the way the segregation, all the things you'd expect to see. But at the time, of course, that was there wasn't really a light from inside being shined on that in quite the way that Ernest Cole was. Ernest Cole eventually was able to get a lot of these photos out, and they were published as a book that became quite renowned called House of Bondage. And it basically got him in the photography world, photojournalist world. He became kind of a cause celeb in the late 60s. He comes out of South Africa because essentially he's pushed into exile. Basically, his book is banned in South Africa. He is never allowed to go back to South Africa, and at the same time, the rest of the world is embracing him as this visionary photographer who's really brought this great thing to the really brought these things to the people that you maybe wouldn't have seen otherwise. And so I would say the first third of this is kind of what you'd expect. Like maybe the first 40% of this movie, kind of what you'd expect, following what it was like in South Africa, especially back then, what his, seeing his photographs, him just talking about the experience of living there. And then he essentially comes to America and he's given grants, and he is expected to continue to do his photojournalism and kind of become a star or continue being a star in this field. Now, first of all, this is narrated by Lakeith Stanfield. I didn't mention that. And most of the things that you're seeing are, well, let's put it this way. After he comes to America, essentially a bunch of his photography is lost. No one is seeing in the photography he's doing for, 20, 30 years almost. And the movie starts saying that in like the late teens, or in the teens, 2000 teens, a bunch of his photography is essentially unearthed from like a safety deposit box or a bunch of boxes in, I forgot what it was Norway or Sweden. It was one of those countries because he goes there for a while. And basically what you're seeing as part of this documentary is a lot of those photos. And you're also hearing through Lakeith Stanfield a bunch of the journal writings of Ernest Cole. So essentially, most of this film is Ernest Cole's photographs and Ernest Cole's words. So you're getting because it feels like really like you're in a diary, you're really in like that kind of internal world, what was happening with him. What I find most interesting about this documentary is kind of unexpected is it ends up being much more a story about a man who is in exile and what it's like to be, even if your home was something that was so terrible in many ways that he criticized, obviously, and that a lot of the world criticized, to be in this kind of quandary of your home is nowhere anymore. You are adrift. You are a refugee yourself or in exile, and you're trying to look at a world you don't know quite as well with that same eye. So, of course, you see him taking photos in America, in the American South in the 60s and the 70s, and New York City and Europe. So although his photos might not be as explosive in those time periods, they do still show you a lot about what he is seeing and kind of in a way, the universality of the kind of the segregation and the class and the race systems that you see, but maybe not pushed out in such an obvious way as it was in apartheid South Africa. And of course, throughout this, you see the changing attitude towards South Africa occurring as the worldwide call against apartheid gets louder and louder. It's interesting. It's a pretty great documentary. I think that as a personal portrait of kind of the, I don't know what you'd call it, disillusionment of kind of someone who's really believes that what they can do can change the world and believes what they do is important and people care about it, to becoming an artist who over time is still seeing the world and still seeing all these things and trying to photograph all these things, but is not viewed back by the world the same way as they were. I'm not going to say exactly where his life goes, but it's a pretty interesting path. And I wouldn't say it's the most uplifting story in the world, but it's pretty impactful. I'm going to go 4.5 on this. I think it's a pretty good documentary for people to check out, especially if you're a fan of documentaries. I think it's quite good. Street Trash. Street Trash is a remake / sequel, not really a remake per se, more of a sequel, directed by Ryan Kruger. Ryan Kruger, if you haven't listened to the interview that Eric did, he did a great interview with Ryan Kruger, and Ryan Kruger is a great kind of a personality and a great low-budget character. We don't have a lot of those right now, but it's kind of cool when we do have some. It feels he's doing movies that are kind of similar to things that would have been done in the 80s, these kind of gonzo movies, and you could see him loving characters like Sam Raimi and Peter Jackson's earlier work and that kind of stuff, Henenlotter, those kind of guys. His other movie that we talked about was Fried Berry, which was its own weird trip of a movie. Street Trash, similarly, is very low budget, very DIY, very rough around the edges, and full of lots of multicolored gore. If you know the original Street Trash, it's not Troma, but it seems like Troma in that it's basically about this fortified wine. Like, you used to have these, I don't know if they still have them, but fortified wines, like super cheapo wines. And it was called Viper. And it was causing the street people to literally melt down into multicolored goo. The most famous scene in that is a guy drinking Viper on a toilet, like a discarded toilet, if I remember correctly, like in a vacant lot or something. And the guy drinks it and melts down into the toilet and flushes himself with his hand. Something like that. It's been a long time. So this movie is a little different. It's a little more of like there's a conspiracy maybe, and there's some kind of a drugs, and there's like, corporate / political forces against the homeless, which there seems to be almost a post-apocalyptic world here. All of it's very rough around the edges, and there's a lot of slapstick, goofy, gross out comedy where you basically get a ragtag band of homeless type or unhoused types of various characters, and they're fighting against the powers that be, and the powers that be have something that causes basically, it's a version of Viper in a sense. I won't say exactly how that manifests. I think your entertainment value in this movie is going to vary a lot on how you feel towards Troma-like movies. I was never a huge fan of Troma-type movies. For me, in a world where I had Evil Dead and Reanimator, Return to the Living Dead, Night of the Creeps, all these low-budget, like monstery effects sort of movies, Dead Alive, that were gory, but I just really, really worked for me. The trauma movies always seemed like a step down from that. They were very, you could tell people were having a great time making them, but they were so almost amateur edge to them that I never really got into them as much. I think this is purposely and self-consciously trying to get the feel of that. And I think it does a really great job of that. So I think this knowingly is trying to kind of capture that ethos and the look and the just kind of the grunginess and everything that you would get in those trauma type movies. And it's just, it's a loving, I say homage or a version of that. And I think if that is your thing, this is, once again, probably 3-star banger on this. This is a movie I feel like I would, if it was just a little more like to my style, I would love it. I like it. It's definitely fun and fast and weird. And I think that if you like the trauma type movies and you really miss those movies specifically, this movie is absolutely what you're going to love. So I think in that way, it's very, very much a 3-star banger. If you've never really been into those kind of movies, this is not going to work for you at all. It's going to be like, what is this crazy movie? So it's very much a movie that kind of goes with your tastes. One thing I want to mention is you got a whole bunch of different characters here with Rat, King, and Mayor Mustard, and Chef. And I want to really point out 2-Bit. This is played by Gary Green, who was the main guy in Fried Berry. And if you know him, you know what he kind of looks like. He's kind of like this burned out, tall, skinny, blonde, weirdo dude. And he's in here too as one of the dudes. He's not the main guy in this. So it's kind of fun because he's a side guy. But the one thing I want to mention about him is he has this imaginary friend / I don't know, like he has an acid trip echo that is stuck with him forever. It's like this little creature named Suckle that every time the 2-Bit character, which is Gary Green's character, every time 2-Bit will say something, like usually he'll chime in from the side when something's going on with some non sequitur. He'll chime in, and then you'll see a flash of this little creature that's next to him, which he sees but no one else sees, also chiming in with something even grosser. So once again, I mean, by all regular standards, this is a crazy low budget movie that isn't really a lot for a lot of people, but I think it'll be a ton of fun for those who like this kind of thing. So once again, for me, it's 3-star banger for Street Trash. Great poster, by the way. I am really loving the current trend I've seen a lot, especially in genre movies, of doing these painted, really elaborate movie posters lately. And the movie poster is fantastic for this. And I like seeing that. I know that Terrifier has been doing that as well, the Terrifier movies, which I don't love, but I love their posters. And that was something definitely in the 80s, especially. You had those great illustrated posters for movies like Indiana Jones and stuff, where you just imagined that it would make you really want to imagine what was in that movie. And it always was that thing like, is the movie going to live up to that poster? And it's like, in most ways, this one does as well. So good on them for that. Okay, here we go. Now we're getting into some of the semi-recommends. Actually, you know what? Before I get into Say Nothing and Emilia Perez, let's talk about Blitz. Blitz is the newest movie by Steve McQueen, and this should be getting on Apple TV Plus, is just had a very short run in theaters. Steve McQueen, Small Axe, not too long ago, like the 5-movie series that he put out in like 4 years ago, which was fantastic, about the lives of different Black people within London in different time periods and different groups and different settings. That movie was fantastic. And he also did, what else did he do? 12 Years a Slave. He did Hunger, if I remember correctly. He's done a bunch of other things. Widows, I think, was also him. And this movie, at first look, it looks like a very, very old-fashioned type movie. And in some ways it is, and in some ways it isn't. It's called Blitz. And it's obviously taking place during the Blitz in London and in England, where nearly every night bombers would fly over from Germany, or German bombers would fly over, probably at that point stationed in France. I don't know the exact history of that, other than know they were getting buzz bombed and they were getting bombed every night. Sirens would go off. People would race and run for shelters and try to keep from getting killed, because obviously their world was getting destroyed like on a nightly basis. And that's the setting of this. But the story was not what I expected. I expected it to be either like Hope and Glory, which it is a nice pairing with Hope and Glory. Hope and Glory was an old movie. I think I want to say John Borman movie from the 80s, where it's kind of showing the way children can find joy in the bombed out rubble and kind of lost children kind of a thing, the bombed out rubble of London. This movie, on the other hand, is from the kid's point of view, and this is almost a kid's movie, like a young teen movie that's not a superhero movie, a young teen movie that is actually got stakes and is actually serious and actually, it expects the younger audience to be able to take something like this, which would seem so boring, and I'm guessing really hard to get young kids to watch it. But it is very, very good. I think young kids did want to watch it. But that being said, for an adult, just go into it with that attitude. It is from the point of view mostly of a kid. During this time, apparently what they did is it was so dangerous for the area, for kids, that the government offered this thing where essentially you could, get your kid registered with them. They basically put them on trains and took them out to the country, and the kids would live out in the country so they would be safe. And of course, in that way, families were split up a whole bunch. And in this case, you have I can never say her name right. Rita, played by S. Ronan. And I'll say her name. Saoirse Ronan. I can never say it right. And you have George, her son, played by Elliot Heffernan. Now, it is important to know that he is of mixed race, because obviously he's going to be dealt with a little differently in London, even now probably, but especially back then, to be a mixed race child in London. And it's not like it's a huge call out in this movie, but there are just interactions consistently throughout the movie that are different in some way because of him being mixed race. And he's seeing the world that way too. And you see his change in time over suspicion and not knowing how people are going to deal with him. And it's partly on that, partly because he's a kid and partly because he's a kid of mixed race. And you never know exactly how the world is going to treat him. But the basic concept is this. This is the great part of this movie. And the part I did not expect. The concept is she gets put on the train. His mom's like, I'm so sorry. I can't wait to see you again, but we need to keep you safe. But I don't have to leave. Do I have to leave, Mom? Do I have to leave? Of course, the kid's not going to want to leave his mother, especially during wartime. And he doesn't have a father because his father got deported quite a while ago. You see a little flashback on how that happened. So he's essentially just with his mother and his grandfather. More on that in a minute. And he gets on the train, and he's pretty well out into the getting out into the countryside, and he's not having it. First of all, he told his mom he hated her. He was angry at her when they parted, and that weighed on him a lot because obviously he didn't want to leave his mom saying he hated her. He was just mad that they had to be split up. He was hurt and scared, so he jumps off the train. And he starts heading back, trying to get back to London and back to his mom and back to his house. So that is the crux of this movie. It's a journey movie. And when I found out that this movie was a journey movie, that made me so happy, because we don't get a lot of those these days. And essentially, this whole movie is him traveling and meeting various people, different kinds of people, some good, some bad, to try to get back to his mom. And the other side of that, of course, you're seeing her life. She's works in a factory, all the things that she's doing. This is a really excellent movie and great. And it's not a small movie. And I felt like it was going to be a small movie, but there are some big sequences in here where, you can even say action sequences to some degree, where, half the city's on fire and planes are crashing around it down and bombs are going off. And there are various sequences that are pretty bravura, big stuff that you wouldn't necessarily expect have to be in a movie like this. But of course, in the center of it all is you're following him. And each time he encounters a new person, is this person going to help him and be great for him? Or is this person going to be a danger to him? I heard a lot of people, a couple of reviews I read complained about a part in the middle of this movie. There is a sequence that is very Dickensian, very, very Dickensian, but I kind of loved it. And I liked the fact that there was something a little bit over the top in the middle of this movie, story-wise, narrative-wise, and I had a lot of fun with it. It's only about a 20-minute section of this movie. This movie's 2 hours long, about a 20-minute section, and I loved it. Also, there's a sequence, once again, not describing it in a way that you'll know what's going on. There's a sequence in a nightclub, and it's kind of somewhat of a oneer, where you're watching this entire nightclub performance, this entire nightclub, and there's a progression of what happens in that sequence that is fantastic, and it leads to part of the Dickensian story, which I also thought was fantastic. Almost a nightmare dream moment in the middle of this pretty realistic movie, but I think this movie is quite fantastic. Very simple concept, very human story, historical, but also vibrant. And I love this movie quite a bit. I'm going to go 5 stars on Blitz. Check it out. You can all check it out too. I think this is really accessible, and I think this is great. It's a great, great movie. Okay, last 2 things are recommendations, but they're still pretty much brand new. We've got a series on Hulu called Say Nothing, which came out this year. I think it just came out in October, so it's pretty recent. Say Nothing, directed by Michael Lennox and a bunch of other people, because it's got 9 episodes. This is also a one and done. This is a one complete story in 9 episodes. If they make another Say Nothing, it's going to be based on something else, because this story is based on a book also called Say Nothing, I do believe, which was highly recommended to me, which I have not read. And it's about the story of Dolores Price and her sister Marion Price, but mostly Dolores Price, and essentially her life from the 60s, early 70s actually, till the thousands. She died, I think in the 1000 teens, she passed away. She's a real person. This is a real story. And it starts out with her recording her story about her life in the IRA to a man who essentially, they're doing this project where they're trying to get people who are in the IRA, because you don't talk if you're in the IRA. It's like the mob. If you're in there and you talk, that could be your life, because it's all about keeping the roles and the things they're doing secret. They're fighting a righteous cause, right? And they don't want people to know what's happening, or basically traitors will cause them to be killed, and then they will kill the traitors, that kind of a thing. So you think at the beginning, like, why is she telling the story? The project this guy is doing, where he's recording people, is essentially he wants to record people who are in the IRA to tell the entire truth of what happened during that time, the entire story, with the understanding that these tapes will be kept under lock and key in a safe somewhere and not released until the death of the person who recorded it. So that way the person who's recording it has no fear of reprisal to themselves during their lifetime, and they're more likely to give the real, honest version of events of what happened to them. And that's essentially, and then most of this series is basically a flashback of what happened to her and her sister and various other people. Lola Pettigrew most of the time plays Dolores Price, the younger version, which is probably 5 or 6 of the 9 episodes, and the last 2 or 3 get mostly into the current kind of, modern day. And of course, this is during the height of the, quote, troubles in Ireland. And wow, this is a great, great series, because what it does, it's really interesting, is it puts you right into her as a young woman, and her just very enthusiastic, and just, she is down for the cause, and her membership, and her, enthusiastic membership and activities within the IRA, and what she did, and kind of the injustice that was occurring in Ireland from Britain. And what this series does is really interesting, I think, is it does put you in the role of a true believer for a cause, and it gets you to understand and to sympathize with the cause that a lot of people have demonized. And then it shows you, the character and yourself, get disillusioned by the cause as time goes on. And that is a really interesting thing to do, where you and the characters are able to get you to go like, wow, I can really see why they're doing it. And this is justice, and they are fighting for the right side. Even though they have to do these tough things, it's a war. You got to do what you got to do, that kind of a thing. And you kind of will buy into it. And the character totally buys into it. But then you see it get chipped away as time goes on, and you see how time and perspective and events give you a whole other view of what was going on. A few standout moments I mentioned on CinemAddicts Facebook group. If you're not a member, you should go there and become a member. I mentioned there how there's one episode which I think is a turning point of the series. I'm not going to say what it's about, because it's very interesting to find out what it's about. It's almost a bottle episode, but it also is absolutely within the overall narrative arc of the series, and it's called Do No Harm. And that episode really is a gut punch, and it is the characters really discovering where they sit in the world and having to deal with it on a personal basis. And it's fantastic. This is a fantastic series. And it's very accessible, but it doesn't pull any punches, which I think is good because a show like this should not pull punches. And it's like, for example, they show the character of Jerry Adams, which is a very famous political figure in Sinn Féin and in the IRA involvement and stuff like that, political stuff in the last 20, 30 years. And he's always been kind of accused by various people of being really involved in some of the activities of the IRA that were more controversial. And this show directly attacks that. The stories that Dolores says directly attacks that. And every episode of this series, has a disclaimer. Jerry Adams has never, said he did any of these things and, steadfastly denies it. Because you're like, okay, you're going to be talking about him again, apparently. But anyway, and then this is one of those great shows where after you watch it, go look up the actual facts and the actual photos, and you see that they didn't appear to stray very far from reality at all in this series. And you'll also get a very interesting fact, which I had no clue about the actor Stephen Ray from The Crying Game. I had no clue. And when that happened in this series, I was like, wow, okay, that's something I didn't know. Anyway, check it out. Okay, last thing. The very last thing I've got for you is Emilia Perez. Oh, Say Nothing. 4.5 or 5 stars. I'm going to say, even though some of the episodes are probably not 5 stars, I'm going to go 5 stars on this because it is, for what it does and for being a series that doesn't have to keep going, I think it's pretty fantastic. So I'm going to go 5 stars. All right. Emilia Perez on Netflix. Is it Netflix? I believe it's Netflix. Yes. Directed by Jacques Audiard. Audiard? I don't know how to say the name. If you don't know him, he's done a ton of things. I haven't seen as many as I should, but I have seen A Prophet, and A Prophet is great. Paris 13th District, which I really loved a few years ago, which I wasn't really liked by a lot of people. I don't get it, but I really thought it was pretty great. That was one of his most recent movies. This movie, Emilia Perez, is quite a bit of its own thing as well. This movie stars Zoe Saldana as Rita and Carla Sofia Gascon as Manita and Emilia Perez, and Selena Gomez as Jessie, and then a bunch of other people. So this is going to be a hard sell for a lot of people. So this is one of those movies that you will probably know if you're interested in it right away or not, because the concept is this. Here we go. The concept is this is essentially a musical, drug cartel, trans, soap opera, drama, musical. I think I said musical twice. So that sounds like a mess, right? In some ways it's kind of a mess, but it's kind of a mess that works, which is kind of amazing that it would work as well as it does. And for some people, this might be a hit it out of the park kind of movie because of its audacity. Basic concept is you've got Rita, Zoe Saldana's character. She's like a lawyer in Mexico City, if I remember correctly. She's a lawyer and she's not happy because she is first of all, she's defending people and getting people off who are terrible people. But secondly, she's doing it kind of behind the scenes because the main lawyer in their firm gets all the credit where it's obvious that she's doing all the work. So she's kind of dissatisfied with her life. And very quickly she gets kind of secretly phoned from somebody that says, hey, you want to make more money? You want to do stuff that will make you very rich? Meet us outside of your work at the newsstand and we will talk to you. And in Mexico City, that doesn't seem like a very wise idea, which it is not. She does what they ask, and she immediately is hooded and kidnapped, taken to Manita, who is supposed to be like the most feared cartel kingpin in Mexico. And if you know anything about the cartels in Mexico, if you're the most feared, that tells you something because the cartels are brutal and you do not die well if they do not like you. You have a horrible fate. So she's, very, very terrified by this guy. And he proposes to her. This is where it gets a little different. He proposes to her, like he will give her a ton of money if she can help him, basically achieve his real life, which is he's always felt he should be a woman. He is a woman. He has had to live this life of brutality, and it's only one part of him, and it's not the part of him that he really feels like is the authentic him. and he feels to be authentic, he needs to have these operations and to transition and secretly disappear from the world. And if she can help him do that, he will, pay her handsomely, and her life will be, set forever. And you're like, okay, that's going to be the path of this movie. And don't forget, there's musical numbers in here. That'll be the path of this movie, right? And that's only like the first maybe 20 minutes of the movie. She finds somebody, he gets changed to Emilia. Well, the other part of her job is that she has to basically take his wife and kids, get them off to like Switzerland, where they'll be safe, because obviously once he disappears, enemies of his could very easily go after his wife and children, and in retribution. His wife is the Selena Gomez character, and you'd think that's pretty much it. And the flashes cuts to like 5 or 6 years later. Rita's living the life. She's well off. She's obviously succeeded. And a woman she doesn't know meets her at a dinner. She starts talking to the woman, and very quickly she discovers that this woman is Emilia, who used to be Manita. And secretly they kind of wink, and Rita's really freaked out, because Rita thinks like, oh man, Emilia is here to kill me because I am a loose end. I know who she is. I'm dead. But Emilia says, no, that's not why I'm here. I want my kids back. I can't live my life. I know I changed. I know that's what I wanted, but I also wanted to have my family. I don't have my children. I don't have my wife. I need to have them again. So can you make sure you get them to me? Let's all move back to Mexico. I want them with my life. I'll pretend to be their aunt. Obviously their dad is gone. So I'll be their aunt, and at least they can live with me and I can see my children. That is the setup of this movie. And it goes in a lot of weird places. Like I said, surprisingly, the musical numbers aren't, you'd think like, oh my gosh, this is not an Annette musical where it's like 90% sung. This is probably 20% sung. This is probably it's a pretty low percentage of actual musical numbers, although they are in here. And there's a lot of melodrama here, which kind of surprised. So there's high melodrama here. There is a lot here about, reclaiming a life that you had, like being an evil person, and can you be redeemed? What does it mean to be redeemed? And if you were an evil person, but that wasn't the real you, right? You changed yourself. Does that make you not evil anymore? Or at the heart there, are you still evil, or can you become good? So it's a lot of redemption stuff here. A lot of stuff that kind of really falls into like Christianity, like the idea of, can an evil person, towards the end of their life, redeem themselves and really change? And does that make them a good person? Can you forget the past? So there's that kind of stuff going on. So it's like cartel musical Mrs. Doubtfire that's not comedy. I don't know. Does it sound like a mess? Yes, but it works so surprisingly well. Although it's definitely going to trigger a lot of people too, because it has like it's like made to trigger certain groups of the US. I'm not as hot on this movie as some people are. I think it's definitely good. I love what it's trying to go for. It didn't quite make it for me, and I'm in the bag for this kind of thing. This could be movie of the year for me. Actually, for me, it's probably about a 3.5 star movie, because some of the stuff doesn't work 100%, and it is a little bit rambling, but what it does do that does well is so interesting and so cool that someone's actually making a movie like this, and it's getting made, and it's a high quality production, that I can't do anything but recommend this, at least as a solid recommend to me, if you are an adventurous watcher. And for some people, this is going to absolutely go out of the park and be great. For others, they're never going to ever get on board with this thing, so 3.5 stars for me. And that should give you some stuff to watch for next week. Really great things out there for you guys. And I would say, if nothing else, Blitz and Say Nothing are pretty much available for you almost right away. So get on those, and then the other stuff will be coming up soon for some of you. All right, talk to you soon.